Hello and welcome to this Tuesday edition of FreightWaves Now. I'm your host Anthony Smith, and coming up, Donny Gilbert is going to give us an update for the brokers. We also have Andrew Cox back with us with a shipper update, but first we're going to go to Zach Strickland with the carrier update brought to you by Powerfleet. Stay tuned.
Hey everyone, and welcome to your carrier update presented by Powerfleet. I'm Zach Strickland, and today we continue to see those volumes just surge across the country. We're looking at a 11,841 on the outbound tender volume index, roughly 20% higher than it was this time last year, which is incredible to watch, especially considering the situation across the United States with the coronavirus pandemic. So, what do these numbers actually mean though? It's not all the same type of freight that we normally see. Looking behind me, we have the average outbound length of haul for all the loads moving throughout the country right now. So all the loads that are moving in that outbound tender volume index, we are seeing a diminishing length of haul. So they're going a shorter distance, but more frequently. This is the shortest average length of haul that we have seen since this index was created way back in March of 2018. So we are seeing a growing number of short haul freight. A lot of this, of course, due to a lot of DCs. Some of the biggest markets across the country are positioned right next to where the population centers are, namely Harrisburg, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but also Ontario. Any market that you're looking at that's going to be positioned near a population center such as Joliet, Harrisburg, Atlanta, etc. So a lot of this freight is getting redistributed into areas where there are people, Columbus, things like that. So looking behind me, we have the outbound tender volume index for each individual length of haul. We have the short outbound tender length of haul, local, long haul, mid haul, and tweener. You don't necessarily need to know what all those mean, but know that the local and the short haul moves are between 0 and 250 miles apiece. So those are the two that are growing the fastest. Roughly 20 to 25% of the overall load volume in the United States right now. But you can see here the long haul freight isn't growing quite as fast as the rest of it. Even though it is growing, we're about 12% higher than we were about a couple of months ago on the long haul volumes. The tweener is also growing a little bit, but yeah, the whole point is that a lot of this freight is moving a shorter distance across the United States. 30% increase in overall local freight moving since about early February or so. So, let's look at the overall country. Outbound tender market share. Again, this is a relative index. It's going to tell you who's growing faster, who's not growing as fast. It doesn't necessarily mean that in Ontario, California, we are seeing diminishing volumes out of Ontario versus this time last week, although we are a little bit. But it does mean that Atlanta is growing at a faster pace than the rest of the country by about 2%. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, gaining a ton of ground in terms of overall volume. A lot of distribution centers, you have a lot of different products warehoused in these areas. Allentown, Pennsylvania, Harrisburg. We talked about Cape Girardeau last week. A lot of DCs sitting in these areas that are moving a lot of household goods, a lot of staples, your pastas, your breads, etc. A lot of that freight comes out of these areas in the country. So that's really what the point is. The short haul freight is going into these retail stores as they're running out of freight or running out of products. A lot of this stuff is getting redistributed. Miami, Florida, 25.7% increase in market share value. So a lot of produce, a lot of goods coming out of Miami regarding the food situation. We're not quite to produce season just yet, but you may get a little peek into that here in just a minute with Donny Gilbert. But yeah, Harrisburg, Allentown, Pennsylvania, Columbus, Ohio, as I mentioned, Indianapolis, a lot of freight coming out of these markets. What does this look like for Harrisburg, Pennsylvania? So seeing a strong increase on volumes as well as tender rejections. We're up around 17% tender rejection rate right now out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So capacity is very tight. As I mentioned before, most of this market is short haul, local haul freight. So anything under 250 miles is dominating this market. It's about 55% of the overall volume coming out of the Harrisburg market. As you can see, a lot of this freight's going to move into New York. Up here where a lot of the population center is it redistributes into these DCs and warehouses, as also some of these storefronts. So all volumes are increasing, however. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get trapped there, but more than likely you are going to have to go into the Northeast, move some of this freight, and you should be charging for it if you are operating in the spot market today. So everyone be safe out there, and that'll do it for today's Carrier Update.
The comprehensive logistics offerings from PowerFleet cover in-cab ELD, fleet management, trailer tracking, cargo monitoring, and tracking other assets such as chassis and intermodal containers. Power up your operations with PowerFleet.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Donny Gilbert, and on today's brokerage update, we're going to kind of start up looking at volumes and then kind of jump over and start looking at what's going on in the reefer markets. So currently right here behind me, I've got a chart pulled up, and in the blue line, these are the current volumes for the U.S. right now. We're at 11,841. Now, the red line here, this is 2019. I wanted y'all to see the difference of what's going on. Here's the big increase in volumes we see from the coronavirus scare, and here's the red line where we were last year. There's a 20% difference between these two lines. So currently right now, we've seen an increase of 20% in our outbound freight markets right now. And this is driving what's going up here. A lot of these spot market rates are going up, capacities tighten up, and this is why our markets are picking up right now. So a great increase here on our volumes, which is currently driving the markets. Now, what I want to look at here is outbound tender rejection rates. And here on this map, I've got brought up both reefer and drive-in outbound tender rejection rates. The blue line is our reefer outbound tender rejection rates, and the red line are our drive-in tender rejection rates. And the reason I want to look at our tender rejection rates is because our tender rejection rates tell us what is going on in the spot markets right now. And we know rates are increasing. I want to look at the red line here first because these are our drive-ins. We saw here around March 1st, March 2nd, we know this is kind of when the scare first kind of started, and we saw an increase in drive-in tender rejection rates taking off at that point. It's kind of been a steady climb going straight up. But here, if we look at our reefer, that's the blue line, we see it kind of stalled out here for several days. Not until at the 11th or the 12th did the reefer start to jump up now. And this is what we've seen going on over the past 4 or 5 days is outbound reefer tender rejection rates are jumping up. And this is a concern to me I'll get to here in a minute, mainly because of what's going on with produce season. If these two collide, could it be the perfect storm? I want to jump out and look at our reefer tender rejection rate map first, because with this increase in tender rejection rates that we've seen for reefer, it's not all spread out across the country. We see there's some major pockets here: South Georgia, northern Florida, the Arkansas, Memphis, and southern Missouri markets. Those are one of the ones that are majorly picking up. And of course, throughout the Midwest, we see some others. On the West Coast, Salt Lake City, Idaho, up into Oregon and Washington, we see some of those markets that have picked up. But mainly the dark blues are right over here in Arkansas, Memphis, and also the north and South Georgia and northern Florida markets. Now, today's March 17th. Around the second half of March is when we start to see produce start to pick up, and we see it coming in the southern Florida markets, and we also will start seeing it cross over into the Texas markets through Laredo and El Paso. So right now, these are areas that the brokers need to watch. We see this gray area right here. This is Lakeland. Lakeland right now has tender rejection rates around right below 8% for reefer, but they have a lot of volume. Miami is already over the 8% mark, but they don't have quite the volume yet, but it's starting to pick up. So these are areas that definitely need to be watched. Jump in the spot markets. We see the rates are already coming up, but how high will they go, and what will the volatility be? We can jump in and look at the Lakeland market here. Right here behind me, I have drive-in. We see where volume started picking up again right around the March 1st and 2nd area. And of course, our tender rejection rates started to follow as capacity tightened up. And again, over here on the reefer, we see the same thing. There's kind of a little bit of a lag on our volumes, and then our tender rejection rates start jumping up around the 12th. So markets you definitely need to watch are the Miami markets, the Lakeland markets, Jacksonville, the South Georgia markets, and of course over Laredo and El Paso. Definitely keep an eye on these markets because they're going to start picking up. And if the coronavirus scare transfers over and collides with the produce season, we could definitely see some rates really jumping up, and you'll see that in tender rejection rates. They will start to soar. Thank you guys for tuning in today.
Voices from every corner of the supply chain concerning all modes of transportation. From the world's largest logistics podcast network, this is what the Freight Tech Revolution sounds like. Freightcast presented by FreightWaves. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to your shipper update. I'm here with Andrew Cox. Andrew, what do you have for us today?
Tony, I got a bit of a continuation of what Zach and Donny just spoke about. This is the short haul reefer is what I'm kind of looking about. JP Hampstead wrote an article yesterday with kind of a thesis on what's happening with the short haul and reefer markets. You're seeing, just massive growth, as Zach and Donny just said. So if we look at the blue line is our reefer outbound tender volume index with the yearly change. So we're up well over 30% year over year. You can see this run in the last couple weeks that we've had here since we began March, when this panic buying really started ensuing, and then short haul as well. It's up near 30% year over year.
So one of the things with short haul is that's really kind of looking at regional deliveries, right? And so reefer, I'm guessing a lot of impacts from the consumer side of things?
Correct, yeah, it's pretty much all consumer. As Zach said earlier, a lot of these DCs and these regional warehouses are right on the outskirts of town or near large populations. So you're seeing a lot of these carriers moving restocking loads to and from warehouses kind of on a very, on a regular basis these last couple days. I actually spoke to a Costco representative in Nashville that says that they run out of like a handful of goods every day by 1 o'clock, and they get restocked at night, and then the next day it's the same deal over and over again. We've seen these videos of, it seems like week-long lines outside of a Costco, and this panic buying isn't going to stop anytime soon. Got you.
So definitely a trend that you think is going to persist in the coming future. So it's not just, so I'm looking at reefers, so these are consumer items, so it's not just things like non-perishables like toilet paper or hand sanitizer. Now we're looking at actual food items, correct?
That's exactly right. When we first started talking about this panic buying, it was toilet paper, it was hand sanitizer, it was sanitizing wipes, there's all these personal items, but now it's shifted to food items. Like I was at a Walmart yesterday in which it seemed like every other aisle had at least some bit of the shelf that was completely empty, whether it was pasta or rice and beans and even meat and dairy, and eggs were completely wiped out. So you have like a lot of these very, the basic food items that everybody goes and gets when they have some sort of crisis like this. They're all being deplenished. So, this is a restocking that will happen over the next couple weeks. It'll happen continuously. Right. Shippers need to be prepared that as this goes on, as Donny was saying, that you do have the beginning of produce season, which is also going to impact some of the capacity. So just be prepared that rates will go up in the next couple weeks.
So this is impressive because, as you mentioned, Donny and Donny mentioned, is that we're not even in produce season right yet. So this is an extremely high rejection rate. Volumes are already skyrocketing, so it's only telling of what's to come as produce season kind of comes online, in addition to some of this panic buying and these increased rates.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, you have so many different factors in play right here, where you have the panic buying propping up rates and propping up volumes. We're seeing outbound tender volume index, at its highest point ever, as Zach said. And you're seeing, again, another point that's happening because of this is that the length of haul is coming way down. They're running shorter loads rather than running cross-country loads because everybody's focused so much on replenishing these grocery stores.
Excellent. And you mentioned you were on the phone not long ago with Costco. You also mentioned JP Hampstead putting out a piece. How can people get more access to some of this information that you're putting out?
Yeah, so all of our stuff comes out through Passport. It is a paywall, but you get an amazing suite of research plus tickets to our events. We'll be having 2 more events this year, even though ATL will be a virtual event, and that's just freightwaves.com/passport.
Excellent, Andrew. Thank you so much. Insightful as always. And thank you so much for tuning in. That's going to do for this Tuesday edition of FreightWaves Now. But the content doesn't stop here. Check us out on all your favorite streaming platforms, our FreightWaves TV app for all the latest content, because we're always streaming around the clock. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode.